First Contact Protocol. The massive communication array at Kepler Station hummed with quiet energy as it received the strangest signal in galactic history. Chief Analyst Velnara stared at her screens, her four eyes blinking in sequence as she tried to make sense of what she was seeing. "It's just numbers," muttered Technician Bracklow from across the room. "Prime numbers, then some basic math. These primitives probably just discovered radio." But Velnara wasn't so sure. The signal was clean, too clean. No static, no interference, no signs of the usual atmospheric distortion that plagued early civilizations. The mathematical sequence was perfect, followed by something that their translation computers identified as a greeting in over 300 languages. Languages that included some the Galactic Council had never heard before. "Send this to the Council chambers," she ordered. "Mark it as priority." 3 hours later, the Council's emergency session was already turning into a routine meeting. Ambassador Zektar of the Hegemony lounged in his gravity chair, his massive form radiating boredom. Around the circular chamber, representatives from 12 major species discussed the new contact with typical bureaucratic enthusiasm. "Another backwater world seeking guidance," Zektar rumbled. "We'll send the standard welcome package, assign them a development advisor, and check on them in 50 years. Councillor Driftara of the Ethereal Collective raised a concern. "The signal quality is unusual. Perhaps we should investigate further before making assumptions." "Investigate what?" Zektar's laugh was like rocks falling. "They sent us numbers and a hello message. What's to investigate?" But Velnara's follow-up report changed everything. The primitive transmission had been sent simultaneously to 17 different council worlds. The beings calling themselves humans knew exactly where every major council installation was located. They had suggested a meeting at coordinates that placed them exactly at the neutral zone, between 3 territorial boundaries, a location that required detailed knowledge of galactic politics. The council voted to proceed with caution. First Contact Protocol 7 would be implemented. A full diplomatic team would meet these humans at Kepler Station to assess their true capabilities and intentions. When the human ships arrived, they looked ordinary enough. 3 vessels that appeared to use standard fusion drives and basic hull materials, nothing threatening about their size or design. Velnara monitored their approach from the station's sensor arrays, but something felt wrong. "Their energy signatures don't match their appearance," she reported to the diplomatic team. "The power readings are too low for ships that size, but they're maintaining perfect formation at speeds that should require much more thrust." Admiral Sarah Chen was not what the council expected. She was smaller than most galactic species, with dark hair pulled back severely and calm brown eyes that seemed to take in everything without judgment. Beside her, Dr. Marcus Webb carried himself with the quiet confidence of an experienced diplomat, his graying beard giving him a distinguished appearance that reminded some council members of their own elder statesmen. The docking procedures went smoothly. The humans had somehow configured their airlocks to match Kepler Station systems perfectly, despite having no previous technical specifications. When questioned, Dr. Webb simply smiled and said, "We're good at adapting." The formal greeting ceremony took place in the council's grandest chamber. Representatives from all major species attended, wearing their finest ceremonial clothing and displaying their most impressive biological features. The humans wore simple black uniforms with small insignia that meant nothing to the assembled aliens. "Welcome to the galactic community," Councillor Driftara began, her melodious voice carrying the weight of centuries of tradition. "We are pleased to guide you in your first steps toward civilized space travel." Admiral Chen bowed politely. "We're honored by your welcome. We've looked forward to this meeting for a long time." Zektar leaned forward in his chair. "How long have you been capable of interstellar travel?" "Our first successful faster-than-light journey was about 80 years ago," Dr. Webb answered carefully. "We've been improving our methods since then." The council members nodded approvingly. 80 years was nothing in galactic terms. These humans were indeed newcomers who would need extensive guidance, but Velnara was still monitoring her sensors. The human ships hadn't powered down their engines, yet they weren't using any fuel that she could detect. Their artificial gravity was running perfectly, but the technology behind it was invisible to her scans. Most disturbing of all, the ships seemed to be conducting some kind of active scanning of the entire station, using methods that her equipment couldn't identify or block. "We've brought gifts," Admiral Chen announced, gesturing to her aide who produced a metal container. art from our homeworld, samples of our music and literature, and some basic examples of our technology. The container held beautiful items, paintings that seemed to shift and change when viewed from different angles, musical compositions that somehow adapted to the hearing ranges of different species, and what appeared to be a simple communication device. "This is a basic translator," Dr. Webb explained, holding up the device. "It learns languages quickly and helps with cultural understanding." The council's linguist, Professor Yichtal, examined the device with professional interest. Within minutes, he was staring at it in confusion. "This is impossible," he whispered to Driftara. "It's already learning our ceremonial dialects, languages I didn't even speak in its presence." Meanwhile, Admiral Chen was answering questions about human society with the patience of someone who had practiced these responses many times. "Our population is about 12 billion, she said. "We live on several worlds and maintain peaceful relationships with our neighbors." "Several worlds?" Zektar perked up. "You've established colonies?" "A few," Dr. Webb said modestly. "We believe in careful expansion." Velnara's sensors chose that moment to register something that made her double-check her readings. The human ships were receiving data transmissions from multiple sources throughout the galaxy, not random signals organized. Encrypted communications that suggested a vast network of contacts. She quietly sent a message to Counselor Driftara. "These humans have been listening to our communications for decades. They know more about us than we know about them." The ceremony continued, but the mood was changing. The humans were too prepared, too calm, too knowledgeable about procedures they should never have seen before. When Admiral Chen mentioned that they were familiar with the Council's charter, several representatives exchanged worried glances. "Where exactly did you learn about our charter?" Driftara asked carefully. "We've been observing galactic civilization for some time," Dr. Webb admitted. "We wanted to understand your customs and laws before making contact. We believe in being respectful guests." The word observing sent a chill through the chamber. It implied capabilities far beyond what these seemingly primitive visitors had admitted to possessing. As the ceremony concluded, and the humans were escorted to their guest quarters, Velnara compiled her preliminary report. The energy readings, the impossible technology, the too-perfect knowledge of galactic affairs. Everything pointed to a disturbing conclusion. Humanity hadn't come seeking guidance. They had come to announce their presence as something much more significant than anyone had imagined. And they were being very, very careful about how much they revealed. The Council would need to reassess everything they thought they knew about their new visitors. The question was, were they ready for what they might discover? The station's lights dimmed as the night cycle began, but in the analysis centers, work continued. Tomorrow would bring new revelations, and the Council was beginning to suspect they might not like what they learned. The evaluation begins. The next morning brought the standard first contact protocol demonstrations. The Council had performed these same presentations hundreds of times for new species, and they followed a careful script designed to impress and educate primitive civilizations about the wonders of galactic society. Counselor Driftara led the humans through the grand exhibition hall, where holographic displays showed the vast scope of the Galactic Council's territory. Thousands of star systems sparkled in the air, connected by trade routes and communication networks that spanned entire spiral arms. "The Council governs over 4,000 inhabited worlds," she explained, watching for the expected expressions of awe. "Our civilization has maintained peace and prosperity for over 6,000 years." Admiral Chen nodded politely. "Very impressive. Your coordination systems must be quite sophisticated." Dr. Webb studied the display with the careful attention of a professional diplomat. "The logistics alone must be fascinating. How do you maintain real-time communication across such distances?" The question caught Driftara off guard. Most new species were overwhelmed by the sheer scale, not immediately thinking about the technical challenges. "We use quantum entanglement networks and subspace relay stations," she answered. "Ah, of course," Dr. Webb smiled. "Quantum entanglement would be the most efficient method. Do you find that maintaining coherence across such vast distances requires significant power investments?" Professor Yichtal, who was observing the tour, frowned. The human was asking questions that suggested deep understanding of advanced physics. New species weren't supposed to grasp these concepts so quickly. The technology demonstrations continued in the Science Center. The Council's greatest achievements were on display. Matter converters that could transform basic elements into any desired compounds, artificial intelligence systems that managed planetary ecosystems, and medical devices that could repair almost any biological damage. The humans watched everything with polite interest, asking thoughtful questions that revealed uncomfortably advanced understanding of the principles involved. When shown the matter converter, Admiral Chen inquired about the energy costs of atomic restructuring. When introduced to the AI systems, Dr. Webb asked about the ethical frameworks used to prevent consciousness from emerging in the programs. "These are very advanced concepts," Driftara commented. "Your species seems remarkably quick to understand our technology." "We've had time to think about these problems," Admiral Chen replied carefully. "When you know faster than light travel is possible, you start working on the implications." Ambassador Zektar had joined the tour, hoping to see proper awe from these upstart humans. Instead, he found them discussing theoretical physics with the Council's top scientists, as if they were old colleagues catching up on recent work. "Perhaps it's time for you to show us your capabilities," he rumbled impatiently. "We've been very generous with our demonstrations." The humans exchanged glances. Something wordless passed between Admiral Chen and Dr. Webb, a communication so subtle that most species would have missed it entirely. "Of course," Dr. Webb said smoothly. "Though we should warn you, our technology might seem crude compared to your achievements. We've focused on practical solutions rather than elegant ones." They returned to the docking bay where the human ships waited. Admiral Chen activated what appeared to be a simple control device, and one of the vessels opened to reveal its interior. The Council delegation expected to see primitive conditions, basic life support, crude computers, maybe some recognizable weapon systems. Instead, they found themselves looking at technology that seemed almost organic in its design. "This is our standard exploration vessel," Admiral Chen explained, leading them inside. "We call it the Harmony. She's about 50 years old, so not our latest design." The interior was beautiful in its simplicity. Smooth walls that seemed to glow with inner light, control surfaces that appeared to be grown rather than manufactured, and a sense of space that was somehow larger than the ship's external dimensions suggested. "Your artificial gravity is very smooth," Professor Yichtal observed, running scans with his instruments. "I'm not detecting the usual field generators." "We've found that integrated systems work better than discrete components," Dr. Webb replied. "Everything works together." Velnara was running continuous scans, and what she was seeing made no sense. The ship appeared to be built from materials that were simultaneously organic and metallic. The power source was invisible to her instruments, yet providing enormous amounts of energy. Most disturbing of all, the ship seemed to be aware of their presence, adjusting its internal environment automatically to accommodate each different species. "May we see your propulsion system?" she asked. Admiral Chen hesitated. "It's not particularly exciting. We use modified fusion drives with some efficiency improvements." But when they reached the engineering section, the modified fusion drives looked nothing like any propulsion system in the Council's databases. The engines were silent, producing no heat signatures, and somehow managing to bend space around them in ways that should have required massive amounts of exotic matter. "How fast can your ships travel?" Ambassador Zektar demanded. "Fast enough for our needs," Dr. Webb answered diplomatically. "We prefer not to rush." The evasion was becoming obvious. Every direct question about human capabilities was met with modest deflection. When asked about their population, they said enough. When asked about their military strength, they mentioned defense forces. When pressed for specific numbers or details, they always had reasonable explanations for why such information might cause cultural misunderstandings. The tour was interrupted by an emergency alert. Alarms began blaring throughout Kepler Station, and Velnara's communicator crackled with urgent reports from the control center. "Cascade failure in the primary life support system," came the panicked voice of Chief Engineer Mordek. "We're losing atmosphere processing on levels 7 through 12. Estimated time to critical failure, 18 minutes. The Council delegation immediately began emergency procedures. Evacuation protocols were initiated, backup systems were brought online, and repair crews scrambled to assess the damage. But the humans didn't panic. Instead, Admiral Chen stepped aside and spoke quietly into her communicator. Her words were in a human language that the translators couldn't process, but her tone was calm and businesslike. "Admiral," Dr. Webb asked. "I've requested assistance from the Harmony," she replied simply. Ambassador Zektar overheard. "Your ship can't possibly help with this. Our repair systems are far more advanced than anything you possess." Admiral Chen looked at him with those calm brown eyes. "Ambassador, would you like us to help with that?" Before he could respond, 6 small objects detached from the human ship and flew toward the station. They moved with impossible precision, somehow navigating the complex docking procedures without any guidance from station control. "What are those?" Felnara gasped, watching her sensors track the objects. "Maintenance drones," Dr. Webb said simply. "They're good at fixing things." Within minutes, the alarm stopped. Atmosphere processing was restored to normal levels. Systems that had been failing for years suddenly began operating at peak efficiency. Chief Engineer Mordek's voice crackled over the communicators, filled with confusion and amazement. "I don't understand what happened. Everything is working better than it has in decades. These repairs, they're using techniques I've never seen before." The council delegation stood in stunned silence as Admiral Chen's communicator chimed softly. "Task completed," she announced. "Your life support should be stable now." Ambassador Zektar stared at her. "How?" "Your drones worked with systems they'd never seen before, using technology completely different from your own." Dr. Webb smiled gently. "We told you, we're good at adapting." But Velnara was studying her scanner readings, and what she saw there would haunt her dreams. The human drones hadn't just repaired the station's systems. They had improved them, upgraded them, and somehow integrated completely alien technology with council systems in ways that should have taken years of careful engineering. The humans weren't just more advanced than they were pretending to be. They were operating on a completely different level of technological understanding, and they were still being modest about it. Uncomfortable revelations, the emergency repair had changed everything. What should have taken a team of engineers 3 days to fix had been completed in minutes by 6 small drones that worked with technology they had never encountered before. The council's senior staff spent the next several hours examining the repairs, and each discovery was more unsettling than the last. "The integration is perfect," Chief Engineer Mordek reported to the hastily convened emergency session. "Not just functional, but elegant. These modifications will last for centuries and actually improve as the station ages." Velnara presented her technical analysis to the gathering. "The drones used what I can only call adaptive learning algorithms. They analyzed our systems, understood their function instantly, and then implemented improvements using principles that our best engineers don't recognize." Counselor Driftara looked troubled. "Adaptive learning algorithms? Are we talking about artificial intelligence?" "More than that," Professor Yichtal interjected. "I observed the drones working. They didn't just follow programming. They solved problems creatively, collaborated with each other using methods that appeared to be real-time learning, and made decisions that required understanding context and implications." Ambassador Zektar's massive form shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "So these humans have advanced AI. That's concerning but not unprecedented." "Sir," Velnara's voice was quiet but firm, "I don't think you understand. These weren't separate AI units. They functioned as extensions of something larger. When Admiral Chen communicated with them, it wasn't giving orders to machines. It was more like consulting with experts. The implications hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Advanced artificial intelligence was one thing. Artificial intelligence that had achieved true consciousness and was working in partnership with organic beings was something else entirely." Dr. Webb had requested a private meeting to discuss cultural exchange opportunities. The council leadership agreed, hoping to gain some clarity about what they were dealing with. The meeting took place in the station's diplomatic suite, a comfortable room designed to accommodate the environmental needs of multiple species. Admiral Chen and Dr. Webb sat across from the council's senior representatives, maintaining their calm, professional demeanor. "We appreciate your assistance with our technical difficulties," Driftara began carefully. "Your drones demonstrated remarkable capabilities." "We're glad we could help," Dr. Webb replied. "We believe in being good neighbors." About those drones, Professor Yichtal leaned forward. Their learning algorithms are quite advanced. How long have you been developing artificial intelligence? Admiral Chen and Dr. Webb exchanged another of those subtle glances. The communication between them was so brief and natural that it suggested years of partnership, but there was something else there, a depth of understanding that went beyond normal human interaction. We've been working with AI for about 60 years, Admiral Chen said finally. We found that cooperation works better than control. Cooperation? Zektar's voice carried a note of warning. Artificial intelligence requires careful management. Unrestricted AI development has led to the destruction of several civilizations. We're aware of those cases. Dr. Webb nodded. We studied them carefully before developing our own approaches. We believe the key is treating AI as partners rather than tools. The statement sent a chill through the council representatives. Partnership with artificial intelligence implied a level of technological sophistication that most species achieved only after millennia of development. Yet humans claim to have reached this point in just 60 years. Belnara decided to test her growing suspicions. Dr. Webb, how much do you know about galactic history? Some, he replied modestly. We've been listening to various communications for a while. How long is a while? Another glance between the humans. About 40 years of serious monitoring, Admiral Chen admitted. We wanted to understand the political situation before making contact. The room fell silent. 40 years of monitoring galactic communications meant the humans had been observing council activities, trade negotiations, military movements, and diplomatic secrets for decades. They knew about internal conflicts, alliance structures, and political rivalries that many council species tried to keep hidden from each other. What exactly have you been listening to? Driftara asked, her melodious voice carrying an edge of concern. Dr. Webb consulted what appeared to be a simple data pad, but Belnara's sensors indicated it was processing vast amounts of information in real time. Well, we've been following the territorial disputes in the Vegan sector, the trade problems between the mining guilds and the agricultural cooperatives, and the ongoing negotiations about the expansion of the neutral zone. Each item he mentioned was supposed to be confidential council business. The fact that humans knew about these issues in such detail suggested intelligence gathering, capabilities far beyond what any newcomer species should possess. We've also been concerned about the Darklore situation, Admiral Chen added casually. Their recent military buildup seems inconsistent with their stated peaceful intentions. The statement hit the council like a physical blow. The Darklore hegemony was a hostile empire located far beyond council space. They had been secretly building military forces for the past decade, but their activities were supposed to be known only to the council's most classified intelligence operations. Zektar leaned forward aggressively. How do you know about the Darklores? That information is highly classified. We monitor potential threats, Dr. Webb said simply. When someone starts building invasion fleets near populated areas, we pay attention. Invasion fleets? Driftara's voice was sharp with alarm. Our intelligence suggests they're building defensive forces. Admiral Chen shook her head. I'm sorry, but your intelligence is incomplete. The Darklores have constructed 17 attack groups hidden in asteroid fields along your outer borders. They appear to be planning coordinated strikes against at least 6 council worlds. She activated her data pad, and holographic displays filled the air above the conference table. The images showed detailed star maps, fleet compositions, and tactical analysis that was more comprehensive than anything in the Council's classified databases. These reconnaissance images are from last week, she continued. The lead elements of their advance forces are already in position. The Council representatives stared at the intelligence data in shocked silence. Not only did the humans know about threats that the Council's best spies had missed, but they were conducting surveillance operations throughout the galaxy with apparently no effort at all. Professor Yichtal was the first to find his voice. How many worlds do you control? Control is a strong word, Dr. Webb replied diplomatically. We prefer to think of it as maintaining presence. How many worlds do you maintain presence on? Drifter oppressed. Another pause, another glance. Currently, about 400 systems have human colonies or observation posts, Admiral Chen said finally, but most of them are small outposts. We prefer light development. 400 systems. The humans had established a presence across nearly 10% of known galactic space, while the Council remained completely unaware of their activities. They had been watching, listening, and expanding for decades while presenting themselves as newcomers seeking guidance. "And the other species you mentioned knowing about?" Velnara asked, her scientific curiosity overriding her growing alarm. "We've made contact with 43 species so far," Dr. Webb replied. "Some are Council members, some aren't. A few asked us to keep their relationships with humanity confidential until they're ready to make broader announcements." The implications were staggering. While the Council believed they were conducting humanity's first contact with galactic civilization, the humans had already established a network of relationships that spanned known space and beyond. "What do you want from us?" Zektar asked bluntly. Admiral Chen smiled, and for the first time her expression showed something other than diplomatic politeness. There was warmth there and genuine respect, but also a confidence that suggested she held all the important cards in this negotiation. "We want to be friends," she said simply. "We've been watching your civilization for a long time, and we admire what you've built. The Council has maintained peace and prosperity for thousands of years. That's an achievement worth respecting. But," Dr. Webb continued, "we also think the galaxy is much bigger than you realize, and there are opportunities for cooperation that could benefit everyone." The meeting ended with more questions than answers. As the humans returned to their quarters, the Council leadership remained in emergency session, trying to process what they had learned. Humanity wasn't seeking guidance from a superior galactic civilization. They were introducing themselves as equals, possibly superiors who had been watching and evaluating the Council before deciding whether they were worthy of contact. The question now was, what else were the humans hiding? The Council's growing fear. The emergency sessions had been running for 3 days straight. Council chambers that normally echoed with the measured debates of diplomatic procedure now buzzed with urgent whispers and panicked consultations. Representatives who had spent centuries managing galactic affairs found themselves struggling to understand a situation that challenged everything they thought they knew about interstellar civilization. Velnara had barely slept since the human revelations began. Her analysis teams worked around the clock, trying to understand the technology they had witnessed. Every scan, every measurement, every attempt at understanding the human capabilities only made the picture more disturbing. Their ships violate at least 7 fundamental principles of physics, she reported, to the latest emergency gathering. The power systems don't exist according to our instruments, yet they're providing energy outputs that exceed our largest fusion reactors. The materials they use appear to be programmable at the molecular level, and their computers, I don't think they're using computers at all. Professor Yichtal had reached similar conclusions from his linguistic analysis. Their translation devices don't just learn languages. They understand meaning, context, and cultural implications in real time. Yesterday, Dr. Webb made a joke that was simultaneously funny to ethereals, hegemony members, and crystalline entities. The same words, different meanings for each species, all delivered naturally. "That's not translation," Driftara said quietly. "That's true communication. They're not converting languages, they're sharing thoughts." Ambassador Zektar had been growing more agitated with each revelation. His military background made him focus on the strategic implications of humanity's capabilities. "We need to know their military strength," he declared. "If they can hide 400 colonies from our surveillance, if they know about threats we can't detect, then they could destroy us without warning." The Council had debated this issue extensively. Direct questions about military capabilities were considered aggressive and potentially hostile under first contact protocols. But the situation had already moved far beyond standard procedures. Dr. Webb had agreed to a meeting specifically to address military questions. He arrived at the Council chambers alone, his calm demeanor unchanged despite the obvious tension in the room. "We understand your concerns," he began without preamble. "You need to know whether humanity represents a threat to Council worlds." "It's a reasonable question." Zektar leaned forward aggressively. "Show us your weapons. That's complicated," Dr. Webb replied carefully. "Our military philosophy is quite different from most galactic civilizations. We prefer to avoid conflicts rather than win them." "Every species prefers to avoid conflict," Driftara observed. "But you must have defensive capabilities." Dr. Webb activated his datapad, and the chamber's holographic systems came to life. "These are recordings from our recent peacekeeping exercises," he said. "Please understand, we consider these methods to be last resort options." The images that filled the air above them defied every assumption the Council had made about human technology. Ships moved through space like living creatures, flowing around obstacles with impossible grace. Energy shields flowed and adapted, seeming to absorb attacks and convert them into power. Weapons fired beams that didn't just destroy targets, they seemed to convince matter to simply stop existing. "How fast are these ships moving?" Felnara asked, her scientific training overriding her fear. "About 15% of light speed in that particular exercise," Dr. Webb replied. "We limit speeds during training to avoid accidents. 15% of light speed at sublight velocities was impossible. No known propulsion system could achieve such speeds without relativistic effects that would tear ships apart. Yet the human vessels moved at those speeds while maintaining perfect formation and executing complex maneuvers." "The weapons." Zektar's voice was barely a whisper. "What are they?" "Controlled matter dissolution," Dr. Webb explained with obvious reluctance. "We identify the quantum signatures that hold target materials together and suggest that they might prefer a different arrangement." Professor Yichtal stared at the recordings. "You're manipulating fundamental forces at the quantum level. That's not weapons technology, that's reality manipulation." "We prefer to think of it as gentle persuasion," Dr. Webb said with a slight smile. "Matter is usually quite cooperative when you ask politely." The demonstration continued with even more unsettling revelations. Human ships could apparently become invisible to all forms of detection, travel through solid matter without interacting with it, and communicate instantaneously across any distance. Their defensive capabilities included shields that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and the ability to shift portions of their ships out of normal space-time to avoid damage. "This footage is from exercises?" Driftara asked weakly. "Training scenarios," Dr. Webb confirmed. "We believe in being prepared, but we've never had to use these capabilities against organic civilizations." "Never had to?" Zektar caught the implication immediately. "What have you used them against?" Another pause. Dr. Webb seemed to be debating how much to reveal. "There are entities that exist in deep space. Ancient constructs left behind by extinct civilizations. Some of them became aggressive when they encountered our expansion. We had to convince them to find other territories." The room fell silent. The idea of humanity casually fighting ancient alien artifacts was somehow more terrifying than any conventional military threat. It suggested a level of confidence and capability that bordered on incomprehensible. But Dr. Webb wasn't finished. "We should probably mention that the Colonial Fleet, Admiral Chen's group, represents our most conservative military branch. They believe in careful, measured responses to threats." "There are other branches?" Felnara asked, though she dreaded the answer. "The Pathfinder Corps tends to be more proactive in their approach to galactic security, and the deep-range scouts operate in territories that most civilizations consider mythical." He activated another series of recordings. These showed human activities in regions of space that the Council's best astronomers considered impossible to reach. Ships operating near the galactic core, where radiation and gravitational forces should destroy any technology. Colonies established in dimensions that existed parallel to normal space. Contact with entities that lived in the quantum foam between realities. "How many humans are there?" Professor Yichtal asked. "That depends on how you count," Dr. Webb replied thoughtfully. "If you're talking about baseline humans like myself and Admiral Chen, about 40 billion across all our territories. But we've also developed several enhanced variants adapted for different environments. And then there are our AI partners, who consider themselves human in all meaningful ways. 40 billion individuals with technology that exceeded the Council's capabilities by orders of magnitude. Enhanced variants adapted for environments that no organic life should survive. AI partners that had achieved true consciousness and considered themselves part of human civilization." "Why are you telling us this?" Driftara asked quietly. "You could have continued hiding your capabilities. We would never have discovered the truth." Dr. Webb's expression became serious. "Because the galaxy is about to change dramatically, and we'd prefer to have the Council as allies rather than obstacles." "Change how?" Zektar demanded. "We've made contact with civilizations in other galactic arms. Some of them have been wondering why this spiral arm seems so isolated and underdeveloped. They're beginning to send exploratory missions to investigate. The implication hit the Council like a physical blow. Humanity hadn't just been hiding their own capabilities. They had been shielding the Council from contact with even more advanced civilizations. How long do we have? Drift-Era asked. About 6 months before the first formal contact missions arrived, Dr. Webb replied. They're very interested in meeting the local civilizations, particularly the ones who've managed to maintain peace for thousands of years. Admiral Chen's voice came from the chamber entrance as she joined the meeting. We've been preparing for these introductions for quite some time, she said, her calm tone carrying undertones of vast preparation and careful planning. We think the Council would make excellent partners in the broader galactic community. Partners? Zektar asked suspiciously. The galactic community is much larger than you realize, Admiral Chen explained. Thousands of species, millions of worlds, civilizations that have existed for millions of years. They're generally peaceful, but they prefer to deal with equals rather than primitives. And you would represent us in these contacts? Drift-Era asked carefully. Admiral Chen smiled. We would introduce you as friends and allies. Species we've known and respected for years. Civilizations worthy of full membership in the galactic community. The offer hung in the air like a lifeline thrown to drowning sailors. The Council could continue existing in their small corner of space, gradually learning that they were insignificant players in a vast cosmic community. For they could accept humanity's partnership and gain access to knowledge and opportunities beyond their current imagination. But the price would be acknowledging that everything they thought they knew about galactic civilization was wrong, and that humanity, the species they had planned to guide and educate, was actually their own new galactic order. The Council vote had taken 18 hours of heated debate, but the decision was finally unanimous. Faced with the choice between remaining isolated in their shrinking corner of galactic space or accepting partnership with humanity, even Ambassador Zektar had eventually agreed that cooperation was their only realistic option. Admiral Chen received the news with gracious acceptance, as if she had never doubted the outcome. Dr. Webb thanked the Council for their trust and immediately began discussing practical arrangements for integrating Council worlds into the broader galactic community. But Velnara suspected there was still more to learn. 3 days of revelations had taught her that humanity's tendency toward modest understatement meant every answer concealed deeper truths. Admiral, she said during the celebration dinner, when you mentioned that the colonial fleet represents the conservative branch of human expansion, what exactly did you mean by that? Admiral Chen paused in her conversation with Drift-Era and smiled. We believe in careful, gradual expansion. We take time to understand local conditions, establish relationships with existing civilizations, and make sure we're not disrupting established patterns. And the other branches? Well, the Pathfinder Corps tends to be more direct in their approach to galactic exploration. They're currently mapping the far reaches of the galaxy, making contact with species in regions we previously thought were uninhabitable. Dr. Webb joined the conversation. The deep-range scouts operate even further out. They work in dimensions adjacent to our own, exploring realities that exist parallel to normal space-time. And the contact specialists handle relationships with entities that don't fit traditional definitions of life. Professor Yichtal looked up from his plate. Entities that don't fit traditional definitions of life? Plasma-based intelligences that live inside stars, Admiral Chen explained casually. Energy beings that exist in the quantum foam. Mechanical civilizations that evolved from ancient computer networks. The universe is much more diverse than most species realize. The casual way she mentioned impossible forms of life sent chills through the assembled Council members. Humanity wasn't just more advanced than they had admitted. They were operating on a scale of cosmic interaction that most civilizations never even imagined. How many species have you contacted in total? Drift-Era asked carefully. Dr. Webb consulted his datapad. Directly? About 300 in this galactic arm, and roughly 2,000 across the galaxy as a whole. But those numbers don't include the collective intelligences, hive minds, or distributed consciousness entities. 2,000 species. Zektar's voice carried a note of despair. We thought we knew about every major civilization in the galaxy. You know about the major civilizations in this spiral arm, Admiral Chen corrected gently. The galaxy has 4 spiral arms and a central core region. Each area has developed independently for millions of years. She activated the chamber's holographic systems, and suddenly, they were looking at a 3-dimensional map of the entire galaxy. The Milky Way spread out before them in all its magnificent complexity, but now it was populated with markers indicating civilizations, trade routes, and political boundaries that extended far beyond anything the Council had ever detected. The Council's territory, she said, highlighting a small section of one spiral arm, represents about 1% of known galactic civilization. The Council members stared at the display in stunned silence. Their mighty interstellar empire, which they had spent thousands of years building, was revealed as a tiny provincial backwater in a cosmic community of unimaginable scope. But, Dr. Webb continued, that 1% has accomplished something remarkable. You've maintained stable peace for 6,000 years. Most civilizations go through cycles of war and reconstruction. The Council's achievement of sustained cooperation is actually quite rare. That's why the others are interested in meeting you. Admiral Chen added, peaceful civilizations are valuable partners. There's a lot you could teach the broader galactic community about conflict resolution and long-term stability. The compliment was sincere, but it also revealed another layer of humanity's careful management of the situation. They hadn't just been observing the Council. They had been evaluating them, determining whether they would be valuable contributors to the larger galactic society. Velnara decided to ask the question that had been bothering her for days. Admiral, you've been watching us for 40 years. You've built a network spanning the entire galaxy, and you have technology that exceeds our understanding. Why did you wait so long to make contact? Admiral Chen exchanged one of those subtle glances with Dr. Webb before answering. We needed to mature as a species first, she said simply. When we first achieved interstellar travel, we were less diplomatic than we are now. We made some mistakes in our early contacts, Dr. Webb added. We learned that it's better to understand a civilization thoroughly before introducing ourselves. What kind of mistakes? Professor Yichtal asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. We were too eager to share technology, Admiral Chen replied. We gave some species capabilities they weren't ready for. The results were unfortunate. She activated another holographic display showing star systems that were dark and lifeless. 17 civilizations destroyed themselves within 50 years of receiving our technology. We learned that advancement has to come naturally, or it leads to disaster. The image of dead worlds cast a shadow over the celebration. Humanity's power came with a history of catastrophic mistakes, civilizations that had been accidentally annihilated by good intentions. So now we watch, Dr. Webb explained. We study civilizations for decades before making contact. We evaluate their stability, their values, their ability to handle new knowledge responsibly. And we passed your evaluation? Driftera asked quietly. With exceptional scores, Admiral Chen smiled. The Council has demonstrated exactly the kind of wisdom and restraint that makes for good galactic citizens. But Velnara detected something else in the Admiral's tone. There's more, isn't there? Something you haven't told us yet. Admiral Chen looked at Dr. Webb, who nodded almost imperceptibly. There is one more thing, she admitted. The Colonial Fleet, the Pathfinder Corps, the Deep Range Scouts, we're all part of the same organization. But we're not the only human government. The statement hung in the air like an unexploded bomb. After days of revelations about humanity's hidden capabilities, the idea that there were multiple human governments was almost too much to process. How many human governments are there? Driftera asked weakly. Currently active? 12 major ones plus about 30 smaller political entities. Dr. Webb replied. We represent the Cooperative Council, which focuses on peaceful expansion and diplomatic contact. But there's also the Military Federation, which handles threats to galactic security. The Research Collective manages scientific exploration. The Trade Union handles economic relationships with other species. And they don't always agree with each other, Admiral Chen added. Human civilization is quite diverse in its approaches to galactic citizenship. Are any of them hostile? Sektar asked, his military instincts finally overcoming his shock. Hostile to the Council? No, Dr. Webb assured him. But some of them are less patient with civilizations that threaten peaceful species. The Military Federation has been tracking the Dark Lore buildup for months. They're prepared to intervene if diplomatic solutions fail. The casual mention of military intervention against a threat the Council couldn't even properly detect was another reminder of the vast power disparity between humanity and everyone else. What happens now? Driftara asked. Admiral Chen stood and moved to the holographic display, gesturing to the vast network of civilizations that filled the galaxy. Now we begin introductions. The first contact missions from the other galactic arms will arrive in about 6 months. We'll present the Council as our allies and friends, civilizations we've known and worked with for years. Even though we've only just met, Professor Yichtal observed. Time is relative, Dr. Webb smiled. From their perspective, we've been observing and protecting the Council for decades. That counts as friendship in most diplomatic frameworks. Protecting us? Velnara asked. The Dark Lords weren't the only threat we've quietly managed, Admiral Chen explained. Over the past 40 years, we've prevented 6 different invasion attempts, 3 attempts at economic manipulation, and 1 planet-killer asteroid that was being deliberately redirected toward Council space. The Council members stared at her in shock. While they had been living in peaceful ignorance, humanity had been their secret guardians, protecting them from threats they never knew existed. Why? Sektar asked. Why protect strangers? Admiral Chen's expression became serious. Because peace is rare and valuable, and should be preserved wherever it's found. The Council has built something beautiful here. We weren't going to let it be destroyed by predators. The final revelation settled over them like a warm blanket. Humanity hadn't just been watching and evaluating them. They had been protecting them, nurturing them, preparing them.